Welcome to our session on loan changes, loan limits and exceptions. Our presenter is Ashley Norwood-Strupa, who is a program specialist for Federal Student Aid's Policy Implementation Division. She has been working on these upcoming changes for many, many months. Ashley will provide information on the legislative aspects of loan limits and other changes. And keep in mind, this is just part one. We will take a break after this first session, and then Ashley will be back for part two. We're setting aside about 15 minutes at the end of each session to get as many questions as we can. We will have microphones available here in Atrium Hall where you can ask your question, but we are also posting a QR code in all of the rooms, so if you don't feel like getting up, you don't have to. You can scan the code and ask your question without leaving your seat. I'd ask that you please take advantage of the resource room where we have plenty of staff available to answer your questions on site throughout the conference. And as we get started into this session, I'd remind everybody to please silence your phones and sit back and learn lots.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ashley Norwood-Strupa, and as Anne-Marie mentioned, I am with FSA in the Policy Implementation Division. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about all of the new loan limits, the provisions that are affecting everybody starting 2026. So let's get started. Hopefully that moved on. I think Anne-Marie already gave me a bit of an introduction. Today, I'm going to be joined with a SME panel, subject matter experts. And today we have Tammy Abernathy with the Policy Coordination Group at Office of Post-Secondary Education. I will also have Jennifer Pattison, who is going to be representing COD, Common Origination and Disbursement, Leah Santor with NSLDS, Blian Sayoum from NSLDS, and Manal Farouk, who will be talking about or helping us with studentaid.gov. This is going to be a two-part session. We're going to split it up between the provisions and then lunch, and then we'll come back for our second session to talk more about the system implications. I expect a lot of your questions may be answered between the two sessions, but we will have time for questions for both. If your questions end up being more about the actual systems and what we're going to see with COD or NSLDS, anything practical like that, I ask that we hold off on those questions until we have our second session. I have a bit of disclaimer. You may have noticed we do not have a final rule on these topics yet. So a lot of these are based on the actual statute readings and the draft regulations. They are not based on a final rule because we don't have one. The comment period just ended this week, and basically what we have to do is we need to get through all of those, make sure all of those questions and concerns are addressed before we can really effectually answer all of the questions. So there will be upcoming guidance that will come out this spring to help answer a lot more questions. But this is what we can work on right now, and again, it is preliminary. So today, we're going to be talking about the legislation and provisions that came out back in July of 2025. It'll be about the definition of the professional student versus a graduate student, which is a new concept for us. We'll have the new loan limits, specifically for graduate students, Parent Plus loan borrowers. We'll also be talking about what we actually call grandfathering, but it's the loan limit exception for currently enrolled students, as well as the new loan limits for less than full-time enrollment, and institutionally established loan limits. So that's going to be the first half of our two presentations. Talk about the actual provisions of these and what is provided in the legislation. So here are the many topics and the many different changes that we're going to have to go over. It provides for a new definition of the professional student. We have eliminated the direct plus loan for graduate professional students, otherwise known as the grad plus loan. Again, there's going to be grandfathering for these provisions. So we're going to be talking about both what's going on for current students who are in that grandfathering period, as well as going forward and moving forward for new students. We're modifying the annual and aggregate loan limits for graduate and professional students, as well as modifying Parent Plus loan annual and aggregate limits, which is a completely new concept for a lot of our schools. It creates a new direct loan lifetime maximum aggregate limit as well, which is going to be affecting all of our students. And it's going to be talking about the grandfathering period as well as the institutional ability to limit borrowing based on the program a student is in, as long as it's based on the whole program and not just individual students. How did we get here? We had a negotiated rulemaking session, otherwise known as Reimagining and Improving Student Education, and we used the acronym for RISE. Back in late September and early October, we had our first session, as well as our second session, which was in early November. We did all of this during the government shutdown, and I want to thank everyone who was there with us, all the department employees who went through that period with us to get these negotiations all together, and we were able to come to consensus. For those who are newer to working in higher education, negotiated rulemaking is where we come together with Department of Education negotiators and then other constituencies, where we come together and discuss how we're going to modify the regulations and try to meet everyone's needs. Consensus does not mean that everyone is super happy with how we came out with it. But it is an indication that everyone can live with the rules that we came up with. The language we came up with was heavily negotiated, and we were really proud to say that we came to consensus with all the constituencies that were there with us over those 2 weeks. Now, definition of professional student. For those who are at graduate schools, medical schools, any of the other graduate institutions, this is definitely a new provision for our students. I'm going to read this verbatim at first, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about it. So previously, we called this graduate and professional students. It was just one group. As long as you'd already had a bachelor's degree, this is, once you get on to the next level, you're just a graduate and professional student. Graduate student now means a student enrolled in a program that awards a graduate credential upon completion, such as a master's degree. The professional student definition is a professional student must be enrolled in a program of study that awards a professional degree upon completion of the program. The professional student must not receive Title IV aid as an undergraduate student for the same period of enrollment. A professional degree signifies both completion of the academic requirements for beginning practice in a given profession and a level of professional skill beyond what is normally required for a bachelor's degree. A professional degree is generally at the doctoral level that requires at least 6 academic years of post-secondary education, including at least 2 years of post-baccalaureate work. So very briefly, graduate student is going to be essentially a master's degree. Professional student is going to be a program that awards a professional degree indicating a certain level of skill that is required to be in practice in a given profession. Generally, this requires at least 6 years of post-secondary education with at least 2 years at the post-baccalaureate level. So, and generally speaking, we're talking about more practice, and so that students actually go directly into the program that the profession that they are studying for. So these are, in general, the different programs that we're discussing. A professional degree requires this professional licensure, and we are using the 4-digit zip code in one of the following fields: pharmacy, dentistry, veterinary medicine, chiropractic, law, medicine, optometry, osteopathic medicine, podiatry, theology, and clinical psychology. Prior to negotiated rulemaking, this list was already in regulation, except for clinical psychology. Clinical psychology was added during the negotiated rulemaking sessions. New loan limits. These are effective July 1, 2026. The annual loan limit will be changing. Annual loan limits will be changing for graduate and professional students, as will aggregate loan limits, and the new lifetime maximum aggregate loan limits. All of these will be effective July 1, 2026, with the asterisk that there will be some grandfathering, and we're going to get into that in a little bit more in the conversation. There we go. Okay, so here is a brief table for the annual loan limits. Undergraduate students are not being immediately affected. Their loan limits are not changing for both the annual loan limits. Where we're seeing the changes are for the PLUS loans for graduate and professional students. Currently, it's their cost of attendance minus other aid received. For new students and those who do not qualify for the grandfathering, they are eliminated starting July 1, 2026. For the unsubsidized direct loans for graduate students who are not and have not been professional students, it's going to remain at $20,500. Same goes for graduate students who are or have been professional students, again, $20,500. For professional students who are not and have not been graduate students, it's going to be $20,500. And as well as professional students who are or have been graduate students in the past, they are going to be $20,500. Moving forward for July 1, those last two groups for the professional students are $50,000 for a year for the new loan limits. Parent Plus loans. This is where we're going to see another big change, is going to be, currently it's the cost of attendance minus other aid received. Moving forward, it will be on July 1, it will be $20,000 per dependent student. Now, I want to make sure that people understand that it's not $20,000 per parent per dependent student. It's going to be based on the actual student themselves. So if two parents want to borrow for the student, they're still held at the $20,000 per year borrowed for that student. Aggregate loan limits. Again, there's no change for the undergraduate population. Plus loans for graduate and professional students will be eliminated for the new borrowers and those who do not qualify for the grandfathering. For graduate students who are not and have not been professional students, their limit is going from $138,500 to $100,000. For graduate students who have been or are currently professional students as well, their aggregate loan limit will go up from $138,500 to $200,000 minus the amount already borrowed as a professional student. For the professional students who are not and have not been graduate students, it is going up to $200,000 from $138,500. And for professional students who are or have been graduate students, that will be $200,000 minus what was already borrowed for their graduate study. Parent Plus loans. Currently, there is no aggregate limit. For new Parent Plus loans or new Parent Plus loan borrowers and those who do not qualify for their grandfathering, it will be $65,000 per dependent student without regard to any amounts repaid, forgiven, canceled, or otherwise discharged. So this means that parent borrowers cannot pay down their balance to borrow more later. It's also, I'm sure people are in this audience are better at math than I am on the fly, but if you add up the $20,000 per year for the annual limit, that means you cannot borrow the full $20,000 annual limit for all 4 years for a traditional undergraduate student. So parents will have to be aware of that and plan accordingly, because the $65,000 is less than $80,000 if it was $20,000 per year for a 4-year degree. Also, graduate and professional students will need to be mindful of their aggregate limit for unsubsidized loans, especially if they pursue multiple graduate or professional degrees. The aggregate limit is there, and they will need to be aware of it. For qualifying health profession students who currently have a higher annual and aggregate limit, that will go away unless they're eligible for the grandfathering, which it would go away after the grandfathering. So these students are going to need to be advised on how they're going to handle those balances. I do want to stress over and over again that this Parent Plus loan aggregate cannot be paid down. So they need to be aware that if they have If they go back later and want to borrow more after they have had some forgiveness or they've paid some down, they won't be able to do so. Also new, the lifetime maximum aggregate loan limit, effective July 1. This is an aggregate limit that the maximum that may be borrowed for the both undergraduate and graduate unsubsidized loans equal to $257,500. This excludes PLUS loans, so it does not include the PLUS loans. Previously, or right now, when we're looking at the aggregate limits, we are looking at a pool of both undergraduate and graduate borrowing for the subsidized and unsubsidized bucket of loans. We are now like separating those out into two separate buckets. We have the undergraduate, we have the graduate. And so the lifetime maximum aggregate loan limit is the one that brings them both together. This also is the provision that applies without regard to any amounts repaid, forgiven, canceled, or otherwise discharged. So again, once you hit this lifetime aggregate limit, you cannot pay it down to borrow more later. Okay, I've mentioned grandfathering many times, so let's actually talk about what that grandfathering actually means. This is the loan limit exception. So we understand that there are students that are borrowing right now, and they weren't, before this law was passed, they had already made some plans. So what this does is it allows for those current borrowers who qualify for this to borrow at the current loan limits. It is going to be all or nothing. They cannot pick and choose which loan limits they want to use the previous ones or which loan limits, or if they want to use new ones. You either qualify the grandfathering and get all of the grandfathering, all of the current loan limits, or you move forward and you are eligible for the new loan limits. We're not going back and forth. So as of June 30th, 2026, students enrolled in a program of study at an institution and have received a loan for the applicable program of study will be eligible for a limited loan limit exception period. This applies to parents who have borrowed on the student's behalf as well. So new loan limits will apply for the lesser of 3 academic years, or the difference between the total length of the program and the amount that the length that the student has already completed. Please note that this is a 3-year limit. For programs that have really long academic years, I've heard about some programs that can have academic years up to multiple years, 5, 6, 7 years. It's not going to be the length. The academic year will not be 5 or 6 years. It is a 3-year maximum. So it's also based on full-time enrollment. If the student is part-time, they are not going to get additional time to complete the degree at the part-time level and remain in the grandfathering period and get the current loan limits. So it's based on what the posted full-time enrollment is, or expected enrollment is. Now, the easiest of all these provisions, loan limit for less than full-time enrollment. This has been my favorite topic. All right, so this is a big change, and we understand that there's a lot of questions. So the amount of a loan that a student may borrow for any academic year due to the new provisions will be reduced if the student is not enrolled full-time. So it's going to be reduced by the amount that they are not full-time. The reduction in the annual loan limit will be made in direct proportion to the degree in which the student is not enrolled full-time and rounded to the nearest whole percentage point. We did post a Dear Colleague letter, Gen 2504, published on July 18, 2025, to originally discuss this. It will be made effective for the 26-27 award year and moving forward. So institutions are going to have a lot of the brunt of this. Institutions will define the credits needed to be full-time. They will reduce the student's loan amounts in direct proportion to the amount the student is not enrolled full-time, and that's except for non-term programs. This does not apply to non-term programs. The direct subsidized, direct unsubsidized, and grad plus loans will be affected and reduced if a student is less than full-time. This does not affect parent plus loans, It will be evaluated at the time of disbursement. And I'm going to show you some examples as well. It also needs to be rounded, again, to the nearest whole percentage point. So here are the basic steps for reducing the loan limit for less than full-time. Determine the amount of the loan funds the borrower is eligible to receive based on eligibility criteria, such as the grade level, full year, full-time. This is the kind of stuff that you do right now and is not changing. You need to ensure that the student is eligible for disbursement, if the student is enrolled at least half-time, these types of things. Step 2, determine the annual loan limit percentage if less than full-time enrollment is anticipated in advance of receiving the first disbursement. So we need to look at that first disbursement when we are dispersing the loans and establish what the student is enrolled in right now. If full-time is 12 credits, are they enrolled for 12 credits? If they're enrolled for 9 credits, that's 3/4 time. If they're enrolled for 6 credits, that's half-time. That's the best math I can give right now. Step 3 is calculate the amount of the award or academic year loan that the term represents, if calculating for one term or transferring. So for a typical undergraduate student who's in a fall and spring program, for the fall term, that's 50%. So you can't get more than 50% in that first term because it's only 50% of the year. Likewise, if you have a student that's transferring in the spring, we're only looking at 50% of the total year because they're only going to be there for that one term of the 2 terms. Step 4, take that percentage and multiply it by the amount of the loan eligibility the borrower has that equals the annual loan limit amount for less than full-time enrollment status. I know that's super clear for everyone and you have no more questions. I promise I will show some examples. Some specific notes I want to call out. There isn't going to be a published schedule of reductions, like a chart that we originally thought we were going to have. So we want to make sure that it's all in the regulations that are going to be posted with the final rule. The substantially equal disbursements will still stand, except when there's a less than full-time calculation needed. So as it stands now, remember that step 1 I had mentioned you should be doing exactly what you should be doing what you're doing now in establishing what the student is eligible for disbursements. This is one of those. We want to make sure that they are substantially equal disbursements unless we have that less than full-time calculation. That's when the disbursements can be unequal. You can also package with intent to enroll, but you have to evaluate the previous terms when you're at every disbursement. So what happened previously needs to be looked at. You also don't need to go back and make changes within a term. So at the time of disbursement, if the student was full-time and then drops later, but you already dispersed a loan, we're not making changes in that term. That doesn't need to be done. Where the changes will be made is when we go to the next term, and we need to evaluate again what actually happened. We also need to look at the period of enrollment to ensure that it's the direct proportion to the degree that the borrower is enrolled in. All right, and here is our formula. This formula is taken directly from the draft rules. Again, we're going to evaluate this at the time of disbursement. No reduction is necessary if the student drops credits after that disbursement, so we're not calculating again. And subsequent term disbursements will also need to be evaluated and reduced if necessary to accommodate what happened in the previous term. All right, here's our first example. Front-loaded fall term is what I'm calling this. So you've established that there's a 24 credits equals full-time. The students enrolled 50 credits for the fall term. That does not mean that they get extra loan funds in the fall, because they're only enrolled for 50% of the term at this time. In the spring, they're expected to enroll for 9 credits, which is less than full-time. The total expected credits for the entire year is 24 credits. So it's still full-time, even though it's more in the fall, less in the spring. The student, in all these examples, I'm just doing a first-year dependent student undergraduate. The fall term, they're going to get what you would expect for full-time enrollment, $1,750 in subsidized and $1,000 in unsubsidized. Likewise, in the spring, you're going to get the same amount, $1,750 and $1,000. That's because even though the student is less than full-time in the spring term, the 3 extra credits they took in the fall makes them full-time for the entire year. Okay. All right, we're going to move on to the second example. They only get easier from here, right? This is a backloaded spring term. This is the exact opposite of what we just did in the first example. Again, 24 credits is full-time. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Okay. So this is the backloaded spring term. 9 credits are enrolled in the fall term, and 15 are expected in the spring term. They are still enrolled 24 credits for the full year. So that is still full-time for the full year. But in the first term, they are less than full-time, and that's only completing 50% of the entire year. So we are not giving them full-time credits, even though we expect them to enroll full-time for the entire year. We can only base it off of what we know at the time of disbursement. So for that fall disbursement, they're enrolled for 9 credits. So the award amount they're going to receive is $1,313 in subsidized and $750 in unsubsidized. That is 3/4 time, because they are not full-time, they are 3/4 time for the fall term. Now in the spring term, they are making up for it. They are enrolled for 3 extra credits in that spring term to bring them more than full-time for the spring term and exactly full-time for the entire year. So this is where the substantially unequal disbursements comes into play. They're going to receive additional funds in the spring term to make up for the extra credits so that they get the full annual amount. In example number 3, we have full-time in the fall and less than full-time in the spring. Again, 24 credits is full-time here. The students enrolled 12 credits for the fall term, which is full-time. They are expected to enroll for 3 credits in the spring. Total expected credits for the year is only 15 credits, which I think is about 63%. For the fall term, they're going to receive their full disbursement. At the time of disbursement, they are full-time for that term. In the spring term, they are less than half-time. So even though they are 63% for the entire year, they are still less than half-time for that term. So they are not going to receive a disbursement. Because again, remember, step 1 is you need to ensure that they are eligible for disbursement. And they are not eligible if they are less than half-time. Example 4 is where a student drops credits after a disbursement. 24 credits is full-time again. Students enrolled 12 credits at the time of disbursement, but then drop 6 credits afterwards. They're expected to enroll for 12 credits in the spring term. Actual credits is 18 credits once we get to the spring term. So for the fall term, they're receiving the full-time amount of $1,750 for subsidized and $1,000 for unsub. Now for the spring term, we need to go back and we need to evaluate what happened during the fall. And we're going to need to deduct based on what happened in the fall term. So fall term actual enrollment was 50%. They were over-awarded by $875 in sub and $500 in unsub. So the spring term full-time award would have been $1,750 and $1,000. Even though they are enrolled full-time for the spring, they dropped credits during the fall. So we must deduct that amount. So they end up only getting $875 for the subsidized and $500 for unsub. I understand that people have questions, but this is not when we're going to be talking about them. I need to get through these examples, please. Okay, this is my last example. This is a less than full-time academic year. I'm sorry, less than full academic year and less than full-time. So we have a student who normally it would be 24 credits is full-time for annual for the fall and spring. The student is only going to be enrolled for the fall. They are only enrolled for 9 credits for the fall term, which means that the amount is 9 credits at disbursement. That's 3/4 time. So they're only eligible for a maximum of 50% of the annual loan limit, which would be $1,750 for subsidized and $1,000 for unsubsidized. Once we factor in the less than full-time amount, it would be $1,313 in subsidized and $750 for unsub. That would be the 3/4 amount. Okay, institution established loan limits. Institutions will now have the ability to limit the total amount borrowed by a student or parent for an academic year. It must be applied consistently to all students in the program of study. It's not affected by the exception applied to other loan limits. So these exceptions will apply to the entire program. It has to be established in advance, and all students would need to apply to all students in these programs. Now, I want to remind everyone that we have a subject matter expert panel that we are going to pose some questions to. These questions will be more for the actual policy and legislation, the guidance that we can give right now. And then we're going to go over after lunch the system implications, what you're going to see on COD, what you're going to see on SLDS, and what you're going to expect from those and when they're going to start showing up. So that's when we'll take questions about that. And here's the QR code. And we can take these now? We can take these now? Okay. Hi there.
Hi. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Thank you very much. It was an important session. You did a great job walking it through.
Thank you.
So first question. In the example, you've used the term drop credits. Drop can mean a lot of things, and the actual NPRM refers to withdrawn or dropped. So I know we are between the end of public comment and the issuance of final rule, so I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to put you on the spot.
You put me on the spot anyway.
Should we read into this that withdrawn credits, which means something different, and maybe we can go into that a little later, but are withdrawn credits now excluded, and we're only looking at those that are dropped? Because, again, withdrawn, for many of us, means the student really pursued that class, may have stayed until the week before finals, tried to earn, but actually got a W in that class. And that was really concerning about the NPRM, that it included withdrawn credits as part of the definition of things not to include. So do you have any guidance around that yet?
So we don't have guidance on what the actual definitions are going to be of whether it's withdrawn, incomplete. Tammy Abernathy from Office of Post-Secondary Education is going to take that question.
Okay, thank you.
Testing, okay. The requirement is upon disbursement, you will look, just like every other loan disbursement, you are required to look at things. This is nothing new. This is every single loan disbursement, you are looking at eligibility criteria. At the time that you dispersed the fall, they were full-time. At the time that you disperse the spring, you are required, if you are a standard academic year, you are required to calculate if they have a new annual, less than full-time annual loan limit. It is that simple. They got what, no, let me finish, it is. The very first thing you look at is, did they get their money in fall? Yes. Did they get it at full-time? Yes. What are they in the spring? They are full-time, but fall now was 9 hours instead of 12. So they cannot get the full academic year
Yep.
annual loan limit because they're less than full-time.
Except the big difference for us would be, let's use Pell as an example, right? Pell, if a student drops credits before our census date, we would adjust.
This is not Pell.
No, I understand, but let me finish, Tammy. If a student withdraws from a class, right, presumably withdrawal is an attempt. It's part of what we calculate with SAP. It's actually
So Daniel, how do you
attempted in-
consider that at your school? What do you consider that student to be? Full-time?
Full-time for the fall
For the
term.
fall.
Mhm. If they had 12
Credit
credits and
hours?
dropped, if we were credit
You would
hours,
count the credit hours.
we would because
Then aren't they full-time in the spring?
so the question is, at the spring now, you're asking me to go back and look at what their fall
What did you
was.
consider them at the time that the fall semester concluded?
They're still full-time.
Then they're still full-time.
So then we can, that's important.
That's why I say it's really, everyone is so nervous about this, and I get it. I've worked at a school, a very large school. And I thought very carefully about this when we were trying to craft the regs, because it's virtually impossible for you to predict every single scenario that could possibly happen, right? But you consider, the school determines full-time. You determine they're full-time in the fall, they are full-time in the spring. Then why would you apply a less than full-time annual loan limit reduction?
Thank you. I'll take that as an answer. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to take the next question from the ones that were submitted with the QR code. Tammy, this is going to be to you. Does this pertain to clock hour schools?
If my memory serves me correctly, the schedule of reductions is not applicable because the borrowers have to earn their credits before they can get the money, and they can't get any more money until they earn their credits. So you, as an institution that is a clock hour school, you have set up what the disbursement regimen will be based on what you expect them to take. You determine full-time. They get that money. They can't get any more money until you determine the next period of time, whether that's full-time or part-time or whatever. You hold the cards here, right? You are determining what the attendance pattern is for full-time and if that student is meeting that attendance pattern. So because clock hour schools calculate somewhat differently, a lot differently than, standard academic years where you kind of basically try to split it, in this case, the borrowers have to earn, they get money, they earn it, they get more money, they earn it, they get more money up until that full annual loan limit, okay? So that is why it's a little bit different, because you still determine what they are able to earn as part of their program. So you're not advancing the money. So for instance, in a standard academic year, you're giving them all the disbursement at one time. There's not an expectation, well, there is an expectation that they would get those hours that they enrolled for. And after that first, that academic year, they would advance a grade level if they had met like the 30 hours or whatever you define as the full-time. I can't see you, so I hope I'm answering your question.
It's somewhere on the floor.
Oh, that's right, there's no person here, sorry. The lights are really bright, and
They are
I
very bright.
cannot see a thing right now.
Okay, I'm going to take our next question from over here.
Well,
On your tippy toes.
yes, ma'am. At first, I was confused. I'm still confused. So, is there a number, email that we can contact to have a better understanding?
What I will recommend is, yes, you can submit your questions. We will get to them eventually. No, the reason I say that is we have to publish the final rule first, right?
Okay.
I can come up here and I can give you answers to scenarios that we have already discussed through negotiations. I'm not giving you any new information. At this point, we are evaluating over 70-something thousand comments. So yes, public, we have heard from you. We know that this is a point of concern, and we want to meet that. I'm limited as to what I can say, but you can always take my name, my number, my email, and you can contact me. And when I am able to answer these questions, if it is policy related, I will answer it. If it's operational, I'm going to let the loan unit and our PID team answer those. But I am always available for you to at least submit your question. If I can't answer it, I'll tell you. And at such time as I can answer it, then I'll reach back out to you. We know that we're going to get lots of questions. We're working on having a mailbox set up for these types of questions specifically that both the policy teams and the implementation teams can share, and we'll be meeting and discussing these things and then presenting a formal response to you. One thing that I would like to mention is we had an amazing session after session after session of discussion in negotiated rulemaking. We had scenarios. The non-federal negotiators did an amazing job of presenting scenarios to us at the table for us to figure out together and discuss. On the negotiated rulemaking website for the department, we have those scenarios listed with our workup of those scenarios listed. We have discussion questions that were out there. I would recommend that you look at that written material that's already presented on the website for your scenarios and for certain things. The negotiators, non-federal negotiators, they had us on our toes on this. And we met, and I saw one of them, so I know she's here, so she could tell you. We met in a caucus and explained it until everyone could understand it. So please look at the material that's out there, because there is a resource for you in addition to what Ashley's presented today as examples.
Okay, for the next question, I'm going to go to the questions submitted with the QR code. Do we still prorate loans for students only attending in the fall due to degree completion? The answer is yes. So for a situation like that, they're only enrolled for the fall term. Fall term is 50% of a full annual year. Next question I'm going to take from over here.
This question is about the annual loan limits and the reduction for students who are less than full-time. You guys provided some really great examples, and NASFA Ask Regs also has these same ones listed. But what was lacking was a summer header. So if a student attends a school with a summer header at 6 credit hours, and we're not really sure what they're going to be attending for fall or spring, can you provide an example of that situation?
That can be part of the examples that we provide in very general terms, not knowing if we're just kind of based off of what I presented here. If this is a situation where, what are you asking about? Would it be typically a 3-trimester situation, or is it they're doing a summer to take extra credits?
Yeah, summer to take extra credits. So typical academic year, standard term, fall, spring. But they're also attending summer, and that's a header. You did provide, in some of the Ask Regs, there was a summer trailer example. But what would happen if summer is your header?
So for the summer as a header, they're still going to have to be enrolled at least half-time to get disbursement, and it's going to be based on what those calculations are if you go through those steps. We can take that back and show some to ensure that like we're doing it correctly, or everyone's doing it correctly. I cannot do the math in front of you right now.
For sure. So if you just put it out there, that would be great. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Ashley, can I say something on that?
Go ahead.
So if a student, you're doing a summer header, fall, spring. Students enrolled 3 hours for the summer. No. Student is enrolled 3 hours for the summer, and then they enroll 6 hours in the fall, and then they enroll whatever they want to enroll in spring. So you would count the 3 hours from the summer. They can't get aid for that period because all disbursement rules still apply. All eligibility criteria still applies. I think sometimes we get nervous about this schedule of reductions, but how many of you here have processed a one-term loan for a standard academic year? How many of you have processed an increase from a grade level as a spring only in a standard academic year? How many of you have adjusted for over awards? Have you looked at annual loan limits before today? It's all the same. You're going to do the same. You do the same checks that you've done before. Now, this is a new annual loan limit. It replaces the annual loan limit for whatever grade level the student is at when they are less than full-time. So you can add those together, and if it comes out to be 24, if it's 24, then they are considered full-time for that academic year. It's an academic year loan limit, not a semester by semester. It differs from Pell, and that's why we are not calling it enrollment intensity. This is completely different. It's an academic loan year limit, and it's the whole year. And we've done the best we can with making sure that that first disbursement, it's on disbursement, because that's when you're required to check all of your checks and balances before you disperse funds to a student.
All right, next question is from the QR code. So under the new rules, does that mean regular undergrad loans, while limits haven't changed, cannot be repaid, et cetera, to allow for additional amounts to borrow? So the answer is for annual loan limits, they remain unchanged. The aggregate loan limit for undergrad students also has not changed. What is changing is that there will be a lifetime loan limit for both sub and unsub for undergrad, totaled with graduate unsub borrowing. That amount, that lifetime amount, cannot be paid down to borrow more. Next one will be right here.
So everybody in this room has a sense of urgency. However, there are some schools, such as mine, that work on the BBBA, and these changes are going to be starting now in our April spring semester, because our spring and fall in the BBBA are going to be tied to 26-27. Now, we're waiting patiently for the regs to come out, but we started awarding and we're going to start dispersing soon next month. So I just want to put it out there, the urgency of schools that start before July 1st and not are waiting until the fall. So that being said, we're looking at, again, with proration, if we have an undergraduate student, grade level 4, and they're getting close to their aggregate limit of $31,000, they've borrowed let's say they borrowed $29,000, they have $2,000 left. In their last 2 semesters, 6 credits and 6 credits. Are we prorating the $7,500 of the annual limit, supposedly, or are we prorating what they have left in the aggregate limit of $2,000?
They only have
$2,000
remaining
available.
for the aggregate limit.
Correct.
Well, you can't go over the aggregate limit anyway.
I understand, but there's a
So-
difference between getting 50%
Yes,
of the
there is.
2,000 and 50% of the 7,500, and then just plugging in the 2,000 that is available.
So the first thing that Ashley mentioned was that you have to first determine what the student is eligible to receive. Right off the bat, BBA, standard academic year, you have to determine what they're eligible to receive. If they're only eligible for $2,000, that's where you start. That's the limit you start at. Now, if they are less than full-time, then you have to prorate it down, right? So we do not have examples on borrower-based. We are working to get them, but to be honest with you, we're a little busy with these comments that just came in and ended Monday.
And
we
we're a
are
little
doing the
busy as
final-
well.
No, you're way busier, and I know that, but I can't give you anything until we've drafted a final rule.
And this question had nothing to do with borrower-based. It can be standard academic
It's
year
the
as
same
well.
thing.
I mean,
But it's the same thing. Your baseline starting point, if they have reduced eligibility before you start, that's where you start. All eligibility criteria first. If the eligibility for the limit that borrower can have as a grade level 4 is $2,000, why would you start at $7,500? You wouldn't, right? No, I'm not trying to be funny. If that aggregate limit cap is right there, that's where you start your calculation for what is full-time. And remember, the intent here is to borrowers who are enrolled full-time get full-time loans. Borrowers who are enrolled less than full-time get the equivalent of what they're enrolled at. Okay? Remember that this isn't the intent of Congress. It's to limit over-borrowing necessary, and it is to encourage matriculation from our students. So it's not meant to be punitive. I know that that's probably not, you guys are probably going to throw tomatoes at me or something, but I look good in red. I get it. I understand it is urgent, and we are working on some things, but we also have to wait and follow the rulemaking process. And so I can make sure that as soon as we have drafted the final rule, that we make sure that we may be able to, I'll talk to James and see what we can do in the interim, maybe some focus groups or some things like that where we can have some one-on-one conversations so that we can get you what you need within the parameters of our negotiated rulemaking processes. So we can try to mitigate some of this concern. If you will definitely either email me or give me your contact information, I can make sure that we look at this and figure out what we can say to you until we can get something officially out. We can do that.
I would love to
Okay.
be on any panel or any discussions that you guys would have.
Thank you.
Are schools required to set institutional annual loan limits by program? No. The institutions have a choice of setting an annual loan limit for a program. It is not required to go through all of the programs and set annual loan limits. If you don't want to set it, it's just what the annual loan limit is for undergrad, graduate, professional. We're going to take the first one over here.
Yeah, think BBBA standard terms offered in modules year-round. When a student's second academic year begins, let's say their final semester in their first year, you have a enrollment reduction that does not require an adjustment in that payment period. Would the adjustment apply to a payment period that's in a subsequent academic year? I'm assuming not. You wouldn't want to pierce that academic year barrier.
Annual year loan limit.
Academic year loan limit.
Annual academic award
Academic
year.
year.
Academic
Academic year
annual award. However you want to say that, the AY is
Yeah.
that one AY, not one AY here and another AY here, and you're going to penalize the AY here because of what they did in this AY.
That's what I assumed,
Yep.
what I suggested
Yes,
be
sir.
clarified in the preamble. The other
Okay.
thing that's real similar, a student is appearing to attempt 9 credits, is paid three quarters of their payment period. Later in that semester, their enrollment reaches an increased level. I assume also that, like we would a Pell Grant or anything else, that we would be able to adjust, even though we don't have to adjust down, we would be able to adjust up.
Are you able to adjust up?
Yes.
The only thing I'm going to say to that is the institution has to decide if they want to assume that risk because what happens in spring. So if they come back in spring or whatever next thing they enroll in for your particular situation, as long as you have a confidence level that when you check the subsequent disbursement, I would not have a problem with you increasing that loan in the fall because this is an annual loan limit, but you would have to adjust accordingly in whatever subsequent term of that academic year equivalent is to make sure that it's a full time for the whole academic year. Does that make sense?
I agree, and that's
Right.
That's the
Yeah.
right answer.
Well, thank you. I aim to please. Sometimes.
You mentioned that plus must also be prorated. Is this only for new Parent Plus, or does this also mean Legacy Plus and Grad Plus borrowers? So Parent Plus is not reduced for the less than full-time enrollment, but all loans, but all sub, unsub, and Graduate Plus, whether it's grandfathered or not, will be subjected to the less than full-time enrollment reductions.
Borrower loan limit, borrower annual loan limit.
I'll take this one here.
Can you clearly define when the new OB3 rules become applicable to students, including the start date of the grandfathering or legacy provision? Specifically, I'm looking to confirm the definition of period of enrollment on or after 7/1 for most of these grandfathering provisions that start at that period of enrollment. When we have things like BBAs that have crossover periods, we're really just trying to clarify whether that period of enrollment is specific to the Title IV academic year that individual student is taking, their loan period, or an individual payment period.
We're going to talk about that more specifically in the presentation after lunch. So we'll talk about what is being flagged in COD and how we're establishing that, and what we're using to establish grandfathering.
Okay, thank you.
Take a question over here.
Hi. So here's a pretty specific scenario. Fall, spring academic year. 24 credits is full-time for the year. Typically, they do 12 in fall and 12 in spring. So imagine that a student registers for 12 credits in the fall, and we do the disbursement based on that. A week before finals, they withdraw with fee liability, Ws, from 2 of those courses. So they're Ws. And they're going to be reported to NSLDS as half-time as a result of that enrollment status change. Although, again, they remain fee liable for 12 credits at my institution. For spring, they register in 12 credits. May I disperse the entire full-time amount to them in spring, or do I need to look back at the fact that they withdrew from 6 credits, even though they remain fee liable for those courses, and adjust based on that?
If you change the student's status from full-time to half-time, when you go to disperse the second disbursement, then you are going to see half-time for fall, and you would need to adjust accordingly for spring. If they received a full-time disbursement, then you would certainly, they would be over-awarded, so it would be like any other over-award. You've got to look at it. So they got the money in fall. You determine now that they really were half-time at the end of that disbursement. It's no different than the first question that we had where you look at it. If the institution determines that person is not full-time and reports to NSLDS that they're only half-time, they're not going into repayment. But but when you go to disperse, like any other disbursement rule in the spring, you would look to see this new annual award year loan limit would be applicable, and you would have to adjust the spring to account for the enrollment, the change in enrollment for the fall.
I understand.
And remember, they got the money already.
Yes, so even though there are 12 credits in the spring, I'm still going to be reducing the spring disbursement to kind of offset the fact that they withdrew from 6 credits in the fall.
Because this is an annual loan limit, and that is a full-time requirement for the academic year, the answer to that question is yes.
Thank you.
A current student in a graduate program exceeds the 3-year grandfathering exception. Will they then move from the current aggregate of $138,500 to $257,500? So when a student either exceeds the 3-year grandfathering limit or breaks the grandfathering rules, which is the enrollment piece or the length of time piece, or completes the program, they will be flipped to the new limits, new aggregate limits. So the old limits will no longer apply to them. So remember when I said that when we are in grandfathering, there's no choice there. You're grandfathered for everything, all of those annual and aggregate limits. Once you break that grandfathering, you are then subject to the new loan limits. It's not going to be a kind of like going back and forth. It's going to be all or nothing. So once you break that grandfathering, whether it's exceeding the 3 years, finishing your program, dropping out of the program, and going to a different school, whatever it may be, you are now subject to the new loan limits. And where were we? Over here. Yep.
I have a question regarding the legacy provision. So I know there was clarification made on students changing majors, so specifically an undergrad going from bachelor's of science to a different bachelor of science. My question is regarding graduate students. So like a graduate student who's taking a Master of Nursing concentration in family nurse practitioner, they're switching to Master of Science Nursing in psychology. Does that still qualify for legacy provision as well?
So we're going to talk more specifics. What you're telling me right now, it sounds like they're breaking the grandfathering. It's based on the credential level for undergraduate students, and then for graduate students, it's going to be based on 4-digit zip codes.
Okay.
And so if the SIP, the first for the SIP does not change, then the program is still grandfathered. If the SIP code changes, that breaks the grandfathering.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. I didn't get time to read here, so I'm going to go to a question over here.
My question is similar to hers, but it has to do with what is the definition of enrolled when it comes to the legacy program? So for example, it says they have to be enrolled as of 7/1, but if summer is an optional term, do they actually have to be enrolled in summer if we're a fall spring school? Or as long as they're enrolled in spring and they plan to attend fall, does that count as enrolled? So just the definition of enrolled.
That, I think, is going to be answered better in our second session when we talk about when we talk specifically about COD. And so that we can show you how we are establishing the grandfathering.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to here.
Thank you for coming today and talking to us. We really do appreciate it. I just want to put a plug in for all of our quarter schools out there. All of the examples we've seen so far are 2-semester, fairly straightforward examples. And when you have 4 quarters and a mandatory summer attendance, this becomes exponentially more complicated. And I would just like to say, my question is when we're packaging students, we have a population that are going to hit their expected time to credential in the middle of the year. How do we package that student under the legacy provisions for the initial bit, and then what if they enroll after that? Are we going to consider, if we have new loan limits, will that student be over-awarded because they were getting legacy provisions in the first half of the year?
I think I'm going to need you to just say that one more time.
Sure.
To make sure that I have it right in my head.
Yeah, no problem. So we have 4 quarters, right? And we package
Yeah.
our students with a projected enrollment plan, right?
Uh-huh.
And we have a population of students that are going to go summer and fall, and there is some of them that are just going to have credits left that we know of already, which means they're going to need to enroll in winter. So if they've received plus, for example, in summer and fall, and they've borrowed significant amounts of money, and then they take out loans in the spring, and we look at the annual loan limit, at that point, they will have received loans in excess of whatever the new annual loan limit is, right? Because the legacy provisions will have expired. Is that correct? It's a mixed status situation, right? Because the expected time
Okay, I
to
understand,
credential.
but it's the same, so you're counting these 4 quarters, right? As a crossover of two grade levels?
No, this is a graduate program. We're a medical school, so our
Okay.
programs are long. So the student is in. If they've done any partial half-time enrollment in any prior term, or they took a leave of absence, their expected time to credential, they're going to exceed their expected time to credential in the middle of the year, right?
Okay. We're going to take this one back. If you could specifically send that into this question box,
Okay.
QR code or whatever it is, we need to look at that one. I don't want to answer that one on the fly because I need to see it on paper. I'm sorry, I got to work through
Yeah,
it, and I
it's-
cannot do that in my head.
Yeah, we don't know how to package them. So.
I'm in financial aid. I have to have a
yeah.
calculator.
Thank you.
Are graduate students required to be enrolled full-time in order to receive the maximum loan eligibility? Or can they still receive the maximum allowable amount while enrolled half-time? No. They will need to use the less than full-time calculation if they are not enrolled full-time. They will not be eligible for the full loan amount unless they are actually enrolled full-time. Question over here.
Hello. Prior to these almost new rules, graduate students weren't subject to the same loan proration rules that undergraduate students were subject to. And so previously, if we had a student who we knew was half-time or full-time in the fall, and we knew they only had 1 class left in the spring, so they were going to be less than half-time, we would have done a 1-term only loan, and we would have awarded them the full $20,500 in unsub. If we have a student in that scenario now, are you saying that we can only start with the 10, okay. Great. Also, just a suggestion, can we have a dedicated phone number that we can provide to students at FSA where when they're really confused and mad at us, they can call you and you can back us up, because this is really confusing to us, and the students are definitely not going to understand, so we just, just suggestion for the group.
Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate that suggestion, but yeah, that's not going to happen. But we can look at some materials. Maybe it will help facilitate some conversations with your students.
Are transfer students grandfathered in if they currently have borrowed prior to July 2026? The answer is no. There are two parts to grandfathering. They need to remain at the same school in the same program. For undergraduate students, you can change your major, but you need to stay at the same credential level. So a student who goes from an associate's to a bachelor's would be breaking the grandfathering. A student who graduates and goes to get their master's is breaking the grandfathering. A student that changes schools is breaking the grandfathering because they're going to a different institution.